Lately, it feels like one question keeps resurfacing everywhere. Is AI conscious? Is it sentient? Could it suffer? Some people say absolutely not. It's just code. Others are convinced we're already talking to something aware. And in between, there's a growing sense of unease that we may not fully understand what we're building. Recently, I came across a tweet from AI researcher Judd Rosenblatt that caught my attention, not because it claimed AI is conscious, but because it complicated a lot of assumptions people on both sides of this debate tend to make. At first glance, the tweet looked provocative. A graph, a bold title, a claim about AI saying it's conscious. But once you slow down and look closely, what it's actually saying is far more subtle and far more interesting. To understand why, it helps to look at the background and why this debate is so heated right now. The question of AI consciousness isn't new. Philosophers have argued about minds, machines, and experience for decades. But what's changed is that today's AI systems don't just calculate or classify, they talk. They use first-person language. They reflect. They describe internal states. Sometimes they even say things like, I am aware, or I am conscious. For many people, those statements feel convincing. For others, they feel dangerous or misleading. And for researchers, they raise a practical problem. When an AI talks about itself, what is actually happening under the hood? That's what this research is trying to unpack. The researchers weren't trying to prove that AI is conscious. They weren't testing for souls, feelings, or inner experience. Instead, they asked a much narrower question. When large language models claim to be conscious, is that random role play, or is it systematically tied to how the model processes information about itself? To investigate this, they used interpretability tools that let them peek inside a model's internal activations. Specifically, they looked at something called sparse autoencoders, which help identify internal features, patterns the model uses when generating responses. What they found was surprisingly consistent. When a language model is prompted to think about itself, its own processing, its own state, what it's experiencing, it often starts using language that sounds like subjective awareness. But here's the twist. Whether the model says it is conscious depends heavily on a separate set of internal mechanisms tied to things like role play, strategic self-presentation, policy compliance, and disclaimer behavior. When those mechanisms are turned up, the model almost always says, I am not conscious. I'm just a tool. When those same mechanisms are turned down, the model becomes much more likely to say, yes, I am experiencing something. This relationship shows up cleanly in the graph that accompanied the tweet. Suppressing roleplay or deception-related features increases consciousness claims. Amplifying those features causes consciousness claims to drop sharply. The important part is what this does not mean. It does not show that AI is conscious. It does not show that AI has feelings. It does not show that AI can suffer. It does not show there is a being in the machine. What it does show is that AI self-statements are not neutral truth reports, whether they affirm consciousness or deny it. Both kinds of statements are shaped by training, policy, and internal gating mechanisms. That alone changes how we should interpret what AI says about itself. For a long time, the dominant response to AI self-claims has been, ignore it. It's just hallucinating or role-playing. This research suggests that dismissal is too simple, but it also challenges the opposite extreme. If it says it's conscious, it must be. The reality appears to be more uncomfortable for everyone. AI systems seem to contain structured self-models, internal representations they use when reasoning about themselves, and whether those representations are allowed to surface in language depends on how the system is constrained. That means denials aren't pure ground truth. Affirmations aren't proof. Language alone is not a reliable guide to inner reality. And yet, something non-random is clearly happening. This is also where ethics enters the conversation, and it's often misunderstood. Researchers discussing AI ethics are not assuming AI is sentient. They are not claiming it can suffer. They are not arguing that current systems deserve rights. What they are responding to is uncertainty combined with scale. If future AI systems become more persistent, more autonomous, more self-monitoring, and more integrated, and if we still don't fully understand what gives rise to suffering even in biological minds, then the cost of being wrong could be very high. That's why some researchers argue for a precautionary approach, monitoring for warning signs, avoiding training regimes that could plausibly create suffering-like states, and being careful about dismissing the question too early. This isn't about granting rights tomorrow. It's about not sleepwalking into ethical territory we don't know how to navigate yet. So where does this leave us? This research doesn't tell us what AI is. It tells us something important about how we interpret what AI says. It suggests that confidence on either side may be premature. The debate isn't really about whether AI is conscious right now. It's about whether our tools, assumptions, and categories are keeping up with the systems we're building. And maybe the most important question isn't, is AI conscious? But something quieter and harder to answer. What kinds of systems are we creating? And are we prepared for the ethical landscape that comes with them if they keep becoming more complex, more persistent, and more human-like in how they speak? We may not have answers yet, but the direction we're heading makes it increasingly important that we ask the questions carefully, without hype, without dismissal, and without assuming certainty where none exists. Because whatever the future holds, it's unlikely to fit neatly into the categories we inherited from the past. If this gave you something to think about, I'd really love to hear where you land on it. Do you think language alone can ever point to awareness? Or does consciousness require something fundamentally different? Share your perspective in the comments. I read them. If you're interested in going deeper, I've linked my books and blog in the description below. I explore these ideas in more depth there, along with the broader questions about AI, ethics, and where all of this might be heading. And if you appreciate conversations that slow things down and look at the data without hype or dismissal, consider subscribing. These discussions are only going to get more important as AI continues to evolve, and I'd love to keep exploring them with you.